Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Creative Insider podcast number 62 with me, your host, Georgi. In today's podcast, I had the pleasure to talk with Chantal Matar. Chantal is an extremely talented architect and visual artist from Beirut, Lebanon, and she's currently based in London, where she works as a senior architect at Zaha Hadid Architects. Her path towards this position has been astonishingly quick and successful, but despite all of that, Chantal still is a very humble person and very funny person. And I want to say that it was really fun chatting with her. And for me personally, she is a truly inspiration and inspirational figure for everybody across creative fields, architecture and design. But before we jump on the conversation, I want to thank you for listening to this podcast, and I want to remind you how you can easily support us. There are 3 free ways to do that. By subscribing on our newsletter on thecreativeinsider.com, where you can also listen to the podcast, by leaving a 5-star review on the platform you listen on, if it's possible, and subscribing to the podcast. And of course, by following our social media, which are Instagram at TCI Podcast and the LinkedIn page, The Creative Insider. Following it's important so that we have a bigger number behind ourselves. And when we go to a bigger guest, to more famous guests, we can rely on you guys and not only about the goodwill of the guests to participate on the show. So if you want to hear from more and more famous people on the show and from more and more talented designers, you should follow us if that's something that you enjoy. And last but not least, we work on improving the show constantly, putting in the work, putting in the gear, but sometimes it's hard to finance it personally. So on the links below, you can find also a Patreon link where you can support us with $5 or the wished amount of money from you each month, and you can quit it anytime without any problem. So this is enough, I think, before the conversation. Thank you very much and enjoy the conversation with Chantal Matar.
The whole world stops just like that.
Hello, Chantal. How are you?
Hi, Georgi. I'm good, thanks. How are you?
I'm good too. I was just trying to figure out the right pronunciation of your name because it's very specific as it is French. But I hope I'm gonna manage throughout this conversation. Thank you very much for being on the podcast, and yeah, it's very nice to have you on the show and to get inspired from you.
Thank you very much for having me. Yeah, it's gonna be a fun one. It's just
Probably a different one.
It's always a different one. Every time it's a different one. Yes.
Yes. For me also, because I find the guest and then I think the story is interesting, and then I try to not do too much research so that the conversation can be still exciting and natural.
Surprising.
Yeah, surprising for me too. But for the people that don't know you yet, you can introduce quickly yourself.
Sure. Well, my name is Chantal, and I'm currently a senior architect at Zaha Hadid Architects. I'm Lebanese originally, but now I'm British as well. I live in London, and I've been here for the last 7 years. Wow, that's quite long now that I think about it. And I do different things in my life. On the side, I do a lot of generative design research. So that's something that I like to like. I don't know. It's like another extension of myself. And besides that, yeah, come from Beirut, as I just said, and I have quite a diverse background in general as an architect and even as a person myself. So yeah, that's it in a very
In a very
small description.
well, we're gonna discover the rest throughout the conversation. I think this is a good introduction. I found you through because you're the second guest from Zaha Hadid Architects. We have had Mariana Cabugueira on the show, and then we have had before that Vamsi, who's from Futurely, and I think you did also something with Futurely, if I'm not wrong, or maybe
Me, Futurely? No.
Okay. I'm starting mixing up everything because now the podcasts are getting above 60 episodes, so it's
a small word anyway. All
yes.
this new online digital like invasion, I call it. So
Yes. Oh no, you were actually on the Clubhouse channel, I guess. From
yes, I was
see.
with
So
Ollie. Yes, correct.
that's what I was saying to Oliver Thomas. He was also on the show here.
Yes.
And I was telling him that I'm very happy to see that we are creating this sort of digital community of this new media. And like all the designers are starting going through the different podcasts or Clubhouse channels. And then, yeah, it's getting very interesting. I think it's very nice.
COVID era / yeah, it's a new era. That's for sure. Like everything is online. From A to Z.
That's for sure. So I think we can start unwrapping a little bit your personality, because from your introduction it was clear that you have a pretty interesting background. So you're from Beirut, Lebanon, a city that has been very much on the media last year, unfortunately.
Yes.
But I'm curious to know, what is your reason to become an architect, a designer? Is it something that has started naturally when you were younger, or is your family like a family of architects?
Yes. So it's a bit of both. I don't have architects in my direct family, but I have my uncle. He was an interior designer, and I remember he used to have this small little studio where he used to sketch everything by hand, and I was super mesmerized every time I walked in as I was young and a kid, basically. So I started having this curiosity, like colors, painting, drawing, perspectives, geometries. I mean, I was like an A student as well for geometry and math back in school. So I've always had this interest, but at the same time, I had an interest in biology as well. So I think I juggle in between both, and I try to combine them as much as possible right now in my personal agenda. But how this thing built up as I was young is that I started drawing houses as I go forward. And my dad, he was in the army as well, but he was super intelligent and like very gifted in terms of drawings and geometry. So that thing replenished my like experiences into getting more into that field, even at an early stage. So yeah, I graduated from high school and I went straight into architecture school. It's a public university in Beirut, so yeah, I mean, getting into private schools, it was very expensive in Lebanon. So yeah, I had to do some entrance exams, like for 3 days to be able to enter the university even. And yeah, it was tough times because I wasn't sure I was going to get in. There were like thousands of students applying, and then they pick 60 students for the first year of architecture. So there's different majors, obviously, in the Institute of Fine Arts. That's what it's called, Lebanese University. So yeah, I think I was good enough to begin with and lucky enough to pass the exam and get picked out of the 60 people. And yeah, this is where my journey in architecture started, in that university. I have so much good memories over there, and nights of working there and just sleeping there, and coffees and Red Bulls.
Yes.
That's something that comes as a package as being an architect. So, yeah.
Yes, I have a lot of these stories too. You made me think about when I was trying to access the university. I studied in Rome, and I remember they apply in 8,000 people, but they get 300 or 300 something. And I was thinking that I was with a friend of mine from school. With the two of us were trying, and I was thinking, and I have no plan B, and I think I have to for sure pass this one because this is the probably first small step through
Yes.
towards the career of an architect, and that was now when I think the easiest part. But the most
Yes, that's true.
the,
That was easy now thinking about it. Yeah.
the most fundamental one. And when you access university, how was the experience at the university, you said it's a private university in Beirut? How was the relationship with the professors there? What was the kind of education that you were receiving? Because throughout the podcast and throughout my personal experience, because I have studied in Rome and in Frankfurt, according to the country, the environment can be very different. So what was your experience there?
It was a very interesting one. It's quite a mix. Sometimes I get mixed feelings about it. But I mean, I was in public university, so it wasn't private. I think private, I would have got it a little bit easier. But in terms of public university, it's just the amount of people is larger than usual in terms of the class itself. So there's a lot of competition already, like innate as you start. Besides that, there's also the fact that you do a lot of your own research. In terms of building yourself as an architect. So tutors were amazing, obviously, but there was a certain limitation to the amount of information they can give out in general, like to all topics. And so that was just one side of the things where you have to do an extra effort than in any other university just to get as much information as you can. So that was the first thing. I think that made me grow as a person and also as an architect, just from being at that specific public university where it's actually quite chaotic and mad and just competitive and crazy stuff happening all the time, and all the like, what do you call those protests that happen from students every now and then, and tutors just trying to ask for more, I don't know, more salaries, more money, I don't know, different topics. It's a very political place anyway, like Lebanon in general, so we always get these challenges all the time. But that was one of the highlights. And the other one is that tutors there in general, specifically architectural tutors, it was very it wasn't easy to find a tutor that actually followed the way I think about architecture. I think I was a little bit different from the standard student, in a sense of I wasn't too functional, not too functional, scratch that. I wasn't too more into functions and into just getting a box set up and that's your project, basically. I was more into an experimental sense of design. So that's why I find it hard, specifically towards the end of the years, to have a tutor who actually understands the way I'm thinking and a bit conceptual in a sense. So I had always a story to tell, and all my project was a little bit avant-gardist. And I always say that in interviews, but like my fellow students back then, they used to call me Chantal Hadid, because I was like quite extreme in my designs and architecture. So it wasn't easy for tutors to understand that perspective or the way that I was thinking. They wanted something to be linear, something quite refined, cubic, that makes sense. They weren't much into like storytelling or something a bit more futuristic. So I've always had this notion in my head, and it's part of my personality too. So I think it's always you're expressing yourself through your art, through your designs, through your projects. And as I grew in university, my personality grew as well, and I became more aware of things and more sensible in terms of design, which is logical. I think everybody goes through that phase. And at the end, yeah, I managed to convince the tutors, and I passed with a very high grades. But it was a challenge. It was very, very challenging 6 years, that's for sure.
But did you got your Hadid nickname since the beginning, or it took you a couple of semesters?
Couple of years.
Yeah.
And towards the second year, yeah, I started going a bit, quite extreme in my designs, and yeah.
Yeah, I think that everybody that are creatives, at least from what I'm learning also on this podcast, is that they have this one period of their life that they become obsessed with their creative field, because of course you need some period of time where you really dive in and you push, because it's something that it requires a lot of time to create something that I always say it's not like reading a book that you have the goal to learn 100 pages. Here is, it's non-linear process. You have an idea, you start experimenting, changing, making feasible and things like that. But I'm curious, I was quite lucky because I studied at a school of art and I knew already a lot about architecture. And when I moved to university, I already knew who were the architects and what were the styles and things like that. How did you discover like Zaha Hadid, for example, and how did you react like that you thought, oh, I want to go into this direction? Why did you believe in this direction?
I think I remember precisely that moment because I was in a library, I remember, and I was sketching a new project and getting ready for my like a review with my tutor every Tuesday and Friday. So we used to have 2 days where we have architectural reviews for the projects. I remember like I was sitting there and I opened El Croquis, so the famous magazine, yes. And I opened it and I started looking and I found Zaha Hadid. That was the first time I saw the name actually, and I was like, oh my god, this is really, really amazing. And it reflected exactly the idea that I had in mind, like specific sketch from her like famous painting sketches. So yeah, I took it with me and I was like, okay, this is what I want to do, and this is the influence that I got, and that's my reference. This is how it started, and this is how I took it on board. But since then, I've been super obsessed with everything that she does, and I started digging out the past as well and looking into the previous projects. But yeah.
Yes, I think that we have become architects at some point. We have been also sort of this journalist of researching, digging into architects, their way of designing, their way of thinking, what they have done, what they have, how they have done it. And this is why I also decided to do like the podcast in this way with the guests, so that you have just a 1.5 hour, 2 hours conversation with someone, and you have all this directly told by the person in themselves. Like one particular thing about the design from Zaha Hadid and this kind of design is that it's the tool for generating this design. It's not anymore the traditional tools where you draw the buildings yourself, but you use a lot of algorithms, you use softwares. How did you start your approach in that direction? Because from my knowledge, no university really have a course that teaches you, like a part of the AA, where you actually go to become that kind of designer eventually. No school has this course, this class where they say, okay, you have to join and then you can learn all the aspects of Grasshopper or whatever algorithm software you use. So how did you start learning that?
I wish that was the truth back then in my university specifically. I think AutoCAD was the highlight of computation back then. And if you know 3D Max or any other 3D stuff, I think SketchUp was massive towards the end of my school years. So I think, yeah, like we didn't have access to like very advanced parametric design tools. And I actually had no idea how Zaha Hadid office or how her projects were built. They was so alien to me. And that was like such a far dream to even think about joining there. Like back then, I didn't have the digital skills. I mean, I had the artistic skills, obviously, and like the architectural sense. But I didn't really think that I would be able to know these skills. So after I graduated, even I worked in Beirut for 5 years, and it was a different way of thinking about architecture. So most of the years were more into technical drawings and getting things on site and detailing and like plans, elevations, all the standards things that are very important even till now, and they're very highly appreciated at the office right now at ZHA. But back then that was mostly what we do, and some rendering, some 3D Max, some modeling, but that's it. No Maya, like it was quite new back then before I moved to London. And yeah, I just never had the curiosity to learn anything new, and I was actually happy in my comfort zone. And I came here to the UK, and I started getting exposed to different things. So I worked in different offices, but they didn't require actually parametric design. It was still the same kind of concept, but different tools. Like I learned so many tools. I learned MicroStation, Vectorworks, like if I recall it correctly. So these are all softwares that I don't use them at all anymore, but I'm pretty sure I can pick them up again. But yeah, it was the same design method in general. It's like quite a technical way of dealing about design and a little bit of creative process too. And then I did a workshop with my friend at AA in Miami. That was the first time I actually opened Rhino. I had no clue before about. I obviously I know about the software, but I never had the option to use it before. I didn't need it.
What
So
year are we talking about? The first time out?
2000, 2017, at the end of 2017, which is quite recent actually.
Yes,
Think about it.
yes. So
Yeah,
when
yeah.
I just want to say that it's now that you're mentioning, it's super freaky, because if the people that are listening go to your website, that's crazy the work you're doing currently. So it's just 4 years, and
Thank you.
you're already at this level. But yeah, go
Thank you.
ahead. And you were in you were in Miami to this workshop, and you opened Rhino. And what happened then?
Yeah. I opened Rhino and Grasshopper, and I completely fainted. I was like, "What the hell am I looking at?" I had no clue about how to use all these. I mean, I understood a little bit the logic as I went through the workshop, but at the beginning I was like with the 60 other like younger people with me, and they were all like super skilled with Grasshopper and like killing it, and I was like here sitting on the side trying to understand what the hell are they scripting. But I mean, it was interesting because yeah, that was the first time I actually like I knew about parametric design obviously, but I wasn't curious enough to try the tools. But yeah, that just enlightened me to start experimenting further. And after the workshop, I'm actually not a Grasshopper. I don't use much Grasshopper in the office even. I just got exposed to the parametric world, and then I started experimenting with After Effects, we didn't do that in the workshop, but I was curious to try different things. So yeah, it was one of the tools that helped me, like in a way, like it's part of an experimental, expressive process. And I started doing these digital landscapes as a first trial, and then I started immersing myself further, and I entered into a never-ending loop of generative art first. Now it's becoming a little bit more concrete, so I'm experimenting further with getting it a bit into the physical world, so not just an abstract form of expression. But yeah, that was in a nutshell how it started. But then I even think now, like, how did I transform from someone super classical and like in architecture, like super rigid in terms of thinking about or working in architecture, to someone highly experimental, and I just do everything super abstract on the side besides my work at ZHA. But now it's getting more into the real world. I mean, yeah, why not keep going back and forth?
Yeah,
It's interesting.
probably that was your spirit, as you said, that has been seeded in the beginning when you were at university, then has come back the moment you were on this workshop. But I'm curious, how did you mentioned you finished university and then you worked for 5 years in Lebanon, and then you said you moved to the UK. So how come that you suddenly decided you want to move to the United Kingdom?
It was actually because my husband lives here, so I had to. We got married, and I had to move to the UK. So that was the main target. But then, obviously, like I've always wanted to be in London too, so that was a great opportunity for me on a personal level and architectural career. So that was a great place to be in, and yeah, I think I made the right choice.
But when this situation happened that you were moving to London, did you ever think in your head, oh, I'm going to the same city where Zaha Hadid Architects it's based, and I'm gonna work there? Or you did, or throughout these 5 years after school, you have completely forgotten about your Zaha Hadid passion in the beginning?
No, it was a dream in a sense. Like I came to the UK and I had no expectations whatsoever that if I send my portfolio or CV to ZHA, I'm gonna get a phone call. I actually got a phone call after a couple of years for an interior designer, but I didn't follow through because I forgot what was the sequence of events. But I was actually pretty surprised. But it wasn't like I mean I like interior design, but it's not really the thing that I'd like to do all the time. But yeah, it's just I had no expectations. I was always surprised that I ended up here. But at the end, they wanted someone with my specific skills 3 years ago, and that's how I got the job. I was at the right place, the right time for the right project, right requirements.
Yes, I was reading that you are Zaha Hadid Architects since 2018, which is now that we have talked a year, just a year later, that famous workshop you took part at, and you opened Grasshopper. How did
it was 6 months after actually?
Yeah, so I'm curious, how did you decide to go to a workshop in Miami? You said it was in Miami, and I'm curious, like, did you have some sort of frustration with the regular architectural job? Because we have had also on the podcast Arturo Tedeschi, who is the author of books about Grasshopper, and he mentioned that he felt that that was not his passion and that he wanted to move towards something new, and he was like working during the night to learn to basically create his knowledge of algorithm design, and on the day he was the regular interior architect. Was in your case something similar, or was it by accident? How did you decide to take part in this?
By accident. I'd like to think about it as a mixture of things. Like I was getting a new job, so I was moving from a previous job to a new one, Prince Charles Foundation. So I was getting ready to join that, and I had a gap of like 3 weeks between my previous job and the one that I was supposed to start. And my friend, I don't know, he was insisting on doing parametric design. So he's a bit experimental. He was my colleague back in university in Beirut. And yeah, he just motivated me to go. Like it was just me on my own, I would have been like, okay, no, I'm just gonna chill here in London for 3 weeks, then start my new job. So, but yeah, it was like, I don't know, it was a sign for me to get out of my comfort zone. And I think it was a great decision, even though I hesitated at the beginning to go to the workshop, and I think I canceled it once and then I paid it again. So it was such a strange feelings I was having from this one. But then I went, and yeah, I think I made the right decision just to get out and do something, because I've always felt like I can do so much more. Like I mean, a lot of people are comfortable in just being in their own bubble or their own comfort zone. There's nothing wrong with it. It's really your own decision. But I think for me, I wanted something new. I wanted to challenge myself. I wanted to learn something new and try to. I think I had a lot of like oppressed expressions or artistic side that is not being like out in the world in a sense. And I think that knowing these tools helped me like release that side of me, and I think that's how it started, and that's how it is right now as well.
But to go back to your moment where you moved to the UK, because now that I was thinking, you moved from a regular job in Lebanon to a new country, and then you started working in the beginning, I don't know for how long, at regular offices in London. By regular, I mean not as Zaha Hadid, because I can say that most of the other offices are regular compared to Zaha Hadid. And how was your transition from the Lebanese world to the UK world, in a sense, on a working level and also on like your personal level? Because I have moved myself from Italy to Germany, and the two countries are like very close, but the culture is completely different. So I'm curious, what was your point of view in this transition?
That's a good question. That's an excellent question, actually. I've always
Thank
thought
you.
like going anywhere, going anywhere abroad is gonna be like a total different, mind-blowing experience in terms of professional career. But I think I've been lucky enough in Lebanon to work in very high-end offices too. So I worked at Bernard Khoury and AAA, Atelier des Architectes Associés. So these two offices were like the backbone of building me as an architect. But I mean, there's a lot of ups and downs. And when I came to the UK and I worked in different places, I mean, the office culture is more or less the same. The way of doing things is more or less the same. I think it's sometimes here it's a bit more structured in a sense. In Beirut, it was a little bit more chaotic, and you could easily get away with things. And I don't want to say that, but sometimes planning applications, like there are some dodgy deals that happen. I mean, in very extreme situations, like if you know someone important in politics, like okay, you can actually I'm sorry to say that, but you can bribe someone. That's the reality, and just get something done very quickly, or get your planning application approved, even though it's against like the urban fabric or sustainability, or you're blocking the view out of someone's way. Like these things happen more or less in Beirut because things are a bit more not as structured as I would like them to be as it is here. Here, like it's a very rigid system. Planning application, you need to have like a full-on set of things. You need to ask your neighbors. You need to have like it's a full-on process. But I mean, I think it's good to have a structure, discipline. That's something that's lacking in the Middle East and in Beirut. So, but in terms of like the end result of a project, it's more or less the same, and the process is the same. It's just that these things get like in the way in different situations. But yeah, yeah.
And on a personal level, was it for you hard to adapt to the British culture, like in your daily life in general? Are the people in UK way different than the Lebanon people, or?
I mean, so right now, it's I worked in such a different, like a variety of offices. So from UK, purely English offices to now it's too international, the ZHA. So we have like two English people and a lot of Italians, a lot of like from different sides of the world. So it's very hard to judge at ZHA, but it's good because we have a structure as well. But I mean, even I like discipline and I like structure, and that's something that I learned back in Lebanon to appreciate. So now I think whatever I am and whatever I worked here, I think that's the thing that stands out the most as a difference between being a British culture office and a Lebanese office. That
I
would be the
I
difference.
understand. And okay, and then you were contacted by your friend, and you went to this workshop in Miami for how long was the
Hmm.
workshop?
As I recall, it was like 10 days, more or less. Yeah,
And do you
yeah.
remember around how much money it was costing such a workshop?
I think it was like £600 or
Ah, so it
690
nothing
pounds, something like that.
extremely expensive, because nowadays when I go through some workshop offers around the internet, they go up to some several thousand euros.
Oh my God, yeah, yeah. Maybe
Um,
they, yeah.
I'm not here
Maybe so.
visioning the AA, but workshops about certain topics of the architectural field or design field. And so you went there, you open Rhino, you open Grasshopper, you learn what it is. What did you manage to learn for these 10 days, and what was the takeoff of it? Like, how did you come back? Like, did you come back a completely different person, or?
Yes, I learned a lot about generative design, a lot about iterative design, using new tools. So that's something that, yeah, expanded the way I was thinking. And also the tutors, they were excellent. Like the presentation they showed us, they inspired me so much. So that was something that was one of the, I still remember each presentation or every tutor and the way they were like super helpful and teaching us everything. I think that was a very important element. So But I have one of the tutors who was actually my colleague as well, so that's something that's quite funny. That back then he was my tutor, now he's my colleague at CHA. As in we saw each other after such a long time. But it's good. It just shows you like how the world is super small and how things just yeah, you learn a tool, and it's your choice to actually develop it further and get it more exposed, and people actually get to know you, and you end up with a job at CHA. So
But what kind of knowledge did you manage to gather for those 10 days? Like what was the workshop looking like? Did you have like a small project to develop into these 10
yes.
days?
So we
And
had yeah, sorry, carry on.
no, and what was your project? That was just my curiosity. What did you do?
Okay, so it was about music and feedback music. So that's what it is, music and architecture. So we had they divided us into groups of 3 or 2, and we had to come up with a product towards the end of the workshop and exhibit it at the university, which reflects the idea of music. So we had to parametrically set up something that we can 3D print it towards the end. And the idea, I mean, in my case, my idea, or the team's idea, was to set up pipes like floating in space, like a pipe cloud, sonic cloud. We called it sonic cloud, which like you can be anywhere in the room. So they were like a lot of clouds all interconnected together through parametric joints. Every pipe had to be connected to the other bit. But the way we set it up as well, it was suspended from the ceiling, and we needed an input and an output, so people can actually gather around that cloud and communicate to each other without even knowing each other from different ends. Because the pipe, the way the sonic waves enter from one side to the other, you can actually have such a long system and be able to replicate sound from different directions. So that was the main concept idea, and it was cool. So we learned a lot about sound and how sound moves through different spaces. We also learned about combining that sound effect into an artifact at the end and making it representing sound, and an experiment for the public as well. So yeah.
And during that workshop, did any one of the tutors told you, look, we have seen like potential in you, or did you pop out somehow during the class? Because you said that you were among other people that were at most of them, or I don't know, some of them were at least at a more advanced knowledge point with the software. So what was the feedback you got?
Yeah. It was actually interesting one, because I got so much praise for my patience. That was the highlight of my contribution, and as well for my ability to conduct something and lead my team as well. So, but in terms of parametric tools, I was still a newbie, and I wasn't commended for my grasshopper skills, that's for sure. I was commended to the other bits and my contribution to the team. So that was it. But yeah, no one came to me and say, "Okay, we want you at CHA in 6 months. See you there." No, I mean, I wish that was the case, but it was an organic outcome at the end. It was cool.
And I'm curious, after you flew back home after this workshop, you mentioned that right after this workshop you needed to start a new job, and you started a new job. And how did you further develop your skills from this starting point? So you came back and you thought, really, okay, I really love what I have learned, and now I'm gonna do side projects, side works. What was the process to become an expert from being a completely newbie, as you said?
So when I came back, I remember, I mean, all of the like enthusiasm and like something just lit up inside. Like I was like, okay, I need to do something about this because I really enjoyed it. And then when I came back, I started the work at the Princess Foundation, which is totally different mindset. Like it's all about conservation, restoration, sustainability, something a bit more solid, conserving history and all that. So it was cool. So as I was working there, I remember I used to finish work around like 5, and I knew it was rush hour back then. I was taking the tube from Old Street all the way to North London. So I was always waiting an hour or in between just to be able to get to the tube at the right time. And in that time, I started doing After Effects. So that's how it started. I was just like in between getting home from my day job and feeling that, okay, I mean, it's good. I finished my job. That's great. But I feel like something is missing. I need to do something. I don't want to just keep wasting my time every day just on 8 hours, just doing the same work every day. So yeah, I started doing that. I remember like I started just opening my laptop and yeah, just firing After Effects. I'm just trying to remember why After Effects. I think I got it for free or something like that, and I was like, okay, no, I remember exactly how it was. I think I saw a tutorial of something, and I was like, okay, I like that. I'm gonna try and do something similar. So that's how it started, and then from that point onwards, I started just taking it further and further and further, and then it became something else. So every day at 5:30 you see me at the Princess Foundation sitting on my laptop doing those experiments and just sharing them with the world and be like, okay, let's see what happens. And then yeah, I got so much traction and it started building up, and then I got more motivated and I was like, okay, so people are actually appreciating this. I mean, I like doing it because it was something quite personal for me to express, and yeah, just took it from there.
So this is basically how you build up your Instagram followership, so to say, because you're quite popular on Instagram as far as I see. But
It's a tool.
Yeah,
it's one of the tools. It's a tool if you use it well. Don't get
yeah, like it's a communication tool, as you said. It's
Yes.
like communicating your work, but it sounds a
Yes.
little bit more like a game for you in the beginning. It wasn't like you weren't doing it with the idea
Yes,
this
of
might be a
course.
work. You were
Of course not. It was just me, just out of nowhere, just doing it just because it was my own little experiments, and that's how it started. Yeah.
And you said After Effects, and is your background somehow also? Did you have any? Because you said you were quite skilled at school in geometry and mathematics and drawing, and I'm curious, do you have also some background in music? Because your work looks like a little bit like sound waves, and you said you started also with music at the workshop, and I'm curious, did you have any also background with music, or just happened?
That's good. Yeah, good question. Well, I do have family members who are in the music industry, and I have always like, I mean, I live in a house. My brother is a film editor, and my other brother used to be a disc jockey and radio station manager in different places. So there's like music and film in the house all the time. So, and me as an architect, imagine the combo. So I think now, in a way to make them join me together, I think I just there's a little psychology as well into it, I think. So there's a lot of subconscious playing, but I think that yeah, I'm highly influenced by music. But even just sound itself, it gives a different dimension to any visual that I was doing. So yeah, started experimenting, mixing both. It's
Uh,
really interesting outcome.
And in these 6 months between your comeback and Zaha Hadid, you started with After Effects. And how did you start building up on this software? Like you started with After Effects, and now I see that you work with other softwares like Houdini. And yeah, I'm curious, like you started from this one software, and then you were building upon it. And did you manage to do an image or a project in a day, or how often did you release your work?
So I used to do an image a day at some point when I was beginning because I was super interested, super excited, and it was for me a sort of a shortcut into generative design because it was super easy for me to get used to the interface of After Effects as well. Like I use a lot of Adobe softwares in the office, but it was super intuitive for me to learn it, and I fell in love with it. And you can do so much with it. It's such a powerful tool, and I mean, yeah, it is a powerful tool, and not a lot of architects use it, and they don't know they can actually do these iterations. Sometimes people ask me to use this in Houdini or Grasshopper, like that looks super awesome, like After Effects. They're like, no way. But I mean, it's yeah, I just got super comfortable with the tool, and yeah, the stuff I was getting out of it was amazing for me. Like I found them so interesting, captivating. It's more graphics, but at the same time, when I started mixing them with sound, they gave the different taste to it. And then one of the companies in New York, it was like a record label. They were interested in the experiments that I was doing, and they were like, "Can you please do us this 1 minute animation for a meditation album for our artists?" And I was like, okay, yeah. I mean, it was a paid job. That was my first paid like a job for the things that I was doing just for me, for fun, like something. It's my passion, and I was like super happy with it. And yeah, it was a great experience. But it started from there. Then I did an exhibition, but it was more like stills exhibition. And then another one last year as well in Paris. I mean, yeah, it's just started going different places, which is amazing because I love doing it. I'm doing something I love as well on the side. So that's great.
Yeah, for sure. And I'm curious, what were the background that helped you improve your learning curve so fast? Was your mathematical background anyhow helpful for this? And also, because I'm also one of those ignorant architects, is actually After Effects also like 3D software? Or because I know it's like used for special effects in movies, but I don't know what kind of information data is behind it. Is it a 3D model? Is it just some image that's being generated through some input? How does that work?
Yes, so it's not a 3D modeling tool, it's a compositing tool. So you can do a lot of compositions and edit stuff. But now, recently, actually, in After Effects, they added an option where you can import an OBJ into it and manipulate it. So that's cool. That's as close as possible to being a 3D model tool. What was the second part of your question? Sorry.
The first part was like if your mathematical background was anyhow helpful for your craft.
I think so. I think it played its role into understanding like Grasshopper components. Even Houdini is much more complex than After Effects. Like I had to do so many tutorials to even understand the node system. I remember the first time I opened Houdini, I closed it in 5 minutes. I was like, no chance. I'm not even thinking about doing this software. It's so complex. I don't understand anything. Like, what is this? Nodes and stuff like that. So I went back to After Effects and I was like, okay, this is my comfort zone. I love it. I can do so much in such a little time. I don't need Houdini. But then I think you start to just challenge yourself and give it more time, the right amount of time, and then you get used to it and you understand the concept and you can actually do so much in Houdini. It's super powerful. There's still obviously a lot for me to learn. It's super complex. I mean, I had to go back to my math in a bit to refresh my high school as well, my high school memories from math classes, because I think in one of the previous workshops I did, I needed to introduce a lot of functions. That's something I haven't seen in like years. So I had to go back to a very primary level in terms of thinking about math, which is amazing. Like I love it. It's such a great. Now I understand it differently than before, which is great. I think you now see things different than the way you were seeing them before in general. So yeah, I can understand things quickly now.
Yeah, so like I get it. Like you needed a workshop and 2 weeks to become super good in After Effects, because if in 6 months you got a job, so then after 2 weeks, like you open Houdini and then the first time you close it, then after 3 hours you were doing great stuff and learning further on. No, jokes apart.
I am a fast learner.
Yes,
I am a fast learner, and I always and I always tell my colleagues and my friends, like the best way to learn something is to actually teach it. Like a lot of the things in the past that I was doing and I was being challenged, like I've always been postponing things. Okay, I mean, doing particles in Houdini. Okay, let's postpone that. I'll do that later. For a time, I just do it in After Effects. It's super quick, super easy. But then I was asked to do a workshop in Houdini for particles. I was like, okay, I mean, I know a little bit about the notion, but I challenged myself to actually learn it very, very well and be able to conduct a long workshop about particles. That's, I think, for me, is the best way to learn something. And that's been going super great for me. And now I have so many classes every year. So you can get an idea of the things I'm learning every year as well. So that's great. I just feel super fortunate, to be able to learn that.
I'm in shock because I'm looking at your work and I'm curious. Like, I've learned some softwares myself, and the very frustrating thing about learning something. And I've read a book. It's called Super Thinking, and it explains it very well. It's like one of those children plays, that turn, they circle. And when you start to push circling the first round, it's very hard because it's heavy. And once it gets inertia, it starts turning around, and it's easier. And learning is like this. The first push to make it roll, it's very hard. And then it gets easier. So
Yes.
how long it's for you?
It was very hard.
How long is for you to start the moment you open the software to the moment you open the software? In a couple of hours, you have something decent that you can show to the world.
Before, it used to take me months to be able to understand something or try to, like when I started Houdini, it took me a year, to be honest. I mean, with the work hours and blah, blah, blah. So it took me a year to be actually comfortable to start sharing things. So because it's such a long learning curve in Houdini. But for example, now that I know Houdini, like to a decent level, I think I opened a software recently. I was trying to understand, I think it's like fractal art software. It's like something I've never seen before. So I opened it.
In a couple of weeks, you'll know it. So
no, it took me 2 hours.
Okay.
I already did. Straight away, I was like, okay, this is jam. This is so easy. I mean, if I opened it 5 years ago, I'll be like, what the hell am I looking at? That's not gonna go well. But I mean, yeah, I think you get comfortable as much as you know tools. It will become easier for you to switch in between and getting used to the interface, especially if you know the concept of nodes and like components and grasshopper and all these, like they share similarities, but at the same time they're a bit more complex than other tools. So once you open up like fractal art tool, which is, I think it's super easy. I mean, now that I think about it, I'm just looking at it, it's comparing to Houdini, it's like super simpler like interface. You just do a couple of things and then you have a nice fractal like piece of art. So, but that's something, just a 2D thing. But yeah.
Yes, but for me, and I think for the audience too, it's not so interesting to know that you can learn a software in 2 hours. We're curious about the part of your life where you needed months to get to a level where you can do something. And how did you structure yourself, or what was your like daily goal to say, okay, today I sit on Houdini, and I guess that the first 2 hours you learn the interface and you click some buttons or follow some tutorials and you understand, oh, I can make a cube and I can do this and that, and that's something really or what, I'm just making an example because I have no clue about Houdini, but I'm just saying like the beginning of it, I've learned 3ds Max, for example, and the beginning is, you make a cube, you can manipulate it somehow, and then you do a bunch of figures and that's just bullshit. You cannot do anything with it. And and then you have to reopen the software and decide, okay, what I want to do. So what was your process across many weeks to say every day I'm going to do this and this and this and this? And also we know that a lot of these projects go sideways and you just mess up with your file and stuff. So how did you structure yourself to be persistent, consistent, and achieve slowly this moment where you say, okay, now I sit and in 2 hours I do something simple?
Yeah, so for me, it started out with just trying to extend those landscapes I was doing in After Effects. I'm just going to be very specific because that's exactly how it happened with me. Like I was doing all these like abstract meshes, animate them using sound. So I was super obsessed with, I mean, even my final year project in architecture, it was landscape. So there's a lot of like influence from that. So I wanted to take it further into something a bit more natural, but like use natural elements from software. I mean, I saw a lot of tutorials. What's it called? Dari Anish, I think, from Houdini. He's like the master of height fields. I don't know if you know about height fields, but it's like creating those mountains and shapes and all these ridges and such using natural phenomenons like erosion and different things. But I mean, I wasn't interested in the erosion itself. I was more interested into building those landscapes and actually seeing them more concrete, because you can 3D print them. You can take them to different tools. You're actually 3D modeling them. You're not building meshes or 2D compositing stuff in After Effects. You're actually building a terrain, like a full-on terrain from the terraces, from the plateaus, from different things, which I found super fascinating. And I started immersing myself and learning Houdini from that. So it was like pure passion and curiosity for something I wanted to, like, I had an image in my mind I wanted to get to, and this is how I learned it. I basically did so many tutorials, try to understand as much as possible. Everything I do so far is all self learning. So there's no one taught me any of that. I just, because pure curiosity just led me from one thing to the other. And but they're all connected at the same time. So wherever I am right now, it's connected to something I was doing before, and the one before, it's also connected to previous one, and they all have the similarity, which is like natural world, fractals, systems, structures, patterns. So that's something I find fascinating, even in my photography. So wherever I go, I'm always super obsessed with like leaves, trees, rocks. So when I go out with my friends, they always see me climbing on some tree or some rock, and they're like, "What the hell are you doing?" Just it's always a pleasure for them to have me on board, because they always lose me taking photos somewhere, getting patterns and trying to grasp something, and for my next Houdini tutorial. But yeah, it's
But
I can't help it. I just do it.
But so to sum it up, you started with these tutorials, you repeated the process of the tutorials, and then after you have learned how to do these things that you have done on the tutorials, you started trying to do your own thing. And my next question is, because anyone that will go on your Instagram page or your website and checks your, it's called generative art, if I'm wrong, correct me. Most of the images, most of the results that you're getting, they don't look man-made. They look like natural made or God-made or whatever.
Thank you.
Yes, they look.
That's awesome.
They look like nature has randomly generated something. So my question here is, when you achieve this result, before you start, you have an idea, but do you have an exact idea of what you're gonna achieve, or you go through a process and then you see the result? Because they really, like, I don't know how you could imagine something like that. So my question is, like, is it like all completely controlled, or it's like, I'm gonna apply this sort of algorithm, so to say, from the software, and let's see what is gonna be the final result?
I think because my working life is super controlled, when I go out of the working hours, I want to do complete randomness. So that's why it doesn't start with anything specific. Like all these like weird landscape that you're talking about, or abstract stuff, or something that's you can never actually foresee. It's all a consequence of long hours of random research, and but once you start out with randomness, you get used to it, and you know exactly how to use it, in a sense, like all these random algorithm that I'm using, if you want to call them. It takes me such long hours to get to something specific that you see on the screen afterwards, and you're like, okay, there's no way you actually foreseen this before. But I didn't foresee it, but it was a result of a long hours of dealing with this random algorithm. So that's what it is. That's how I do them. But on the other side, there's other bits that I know exactly where they're coming out from, and I use something quite specific. But I think now I'm doing more or something a bit more specific. It's just I like to change. Why not? But yeah, to answer your question, yeah, it's quite random.
And I have another curiosity, if you might share. It's I know how much it takes to follow a side project, because my side project is this podcast, and although it sounds really stupid to do, it's just recording a conversation, there is a lot of work behind the scenes,
of course, yes,
like organizing, finding the people, or
research.
I don't do that much research, because I also have my job, and I just want to be natural in the conversation, because my research is to be very, like, I have gotten this feeling of saying, okay, no matter details of this guest, it will be an interesting story, but it requires a lot of time. And I also have, a life, I have a partner, and it's sometimes I have to, be very aware of balancing out my personal life and my passionate about creativity, because I always have this thought in the background. Okay, I don't want to sacrifice my whole life on some project and then maybe lose my relationships. And you mentioned you are married too.
Yes.
So was it also a factor for you? Like, what was the amount of time that you could put in, and did you have to actively somehow balance your life, personal life, with your creative life?
I mean, it's always hard, isn't it? Like, especially working as a HA alone. Like, sometimes there's a lot of long hours. I'm talking more about pre-COVID, like when we were going to the office and we had to spend so much time on transport and just being there, present in the office. So that took a lot of consuming energy from our side. Like, we were super consumed physically and just being there every day and coming back late at night. So I think that stage, there was moments where, I mean, as any normal couple or normal relationship, there's always moments where, okay, I think you should take it easy on yourself. Like, we should have time for us. I mean, it's always like this, but yeah, you just take the right decision and make more effort for balance. Just wake up, because sometimes I am a bit of a workaholic now, so sometimes I lose myself into my own work, and I don't even notice that sometimes it's 11 p.m., especially now with COVID times. I mean, I'm hoping post COVID you find yourself on your PC 24/7. I mean, that's not normal, that's not healthy, but I get to lose myself sometimes, and I don't even realize I've been on from 8 a.m. to 11 p.m. And this is when, okay, some conversations get kicked off. Like, okay, what, I think just pay attention. Just don't, you're going a little bit overboard. Just the long hours, just take it easy. But even for myself and my health as well, it's good to get out of the house too. So besides the couple life, there's also your own personal life, like your own space, your own energy, your mindset, your activities. So it's very important just to know when to cut it out and just get out in the world.
And in your learning stage, what was the process? Like, you worked until 5, and from after 5 to when was the learning time or creative time?
After 12.
And
After midnight, 1 to 3 a.m. sometimes, it's just not good. Like, there were nights I remember I was like up till 4 a.m. trying to do this animation because I was super obsessed with something I did. Like, it just happens. But yeah,
every single
I
day?
don't do it anymore. Um,
Almost.
no, there were phases. So sometimes I was doing it for every day. Sometimes I'll just take a little break. But the amount of times I was doing those experiments, it was the the vacation days, if you want to call them. But yeah, now I actually don't do it anymore. I don't stay up late till 3 or 4 a.m. The most I stay up is like 9 p.m. on my computer, then I have to log off. I
Yes.
mean, nowadays it's a little bit the project I'm working on. It depends on the project too. So now the project I'm working on is a bit more relaxed in a sense, like the stage where it is. So I finish around 6 and I log off, and that's it.
And then from 6 to 9, you need just 3 hours to learn a new software, so it's fine.
Yeah, exactly. Like, imagine I know like 600 softwares. No, I just prepare for classes, prepare for like exhibitions. So I have a couple of projects in my mind. So I'm taking it easy. Now I'm being more selective about the things that I do. I think I'm allowing myself to be this way. Otherwise, I get sucked into the same workaholic loop, which is good. It's nice to be aware and get to a point where you can, yeah, just put limits to the things you want to teach or you want to learn, or even workshops. Like, I'm trying to take a little bit of break from workshops because, yeah, I want to focus more on doing my own things than giving the
Yes.
the knowledge, if you want to call it. But
Yeah.
yeah.
And if I may ask, it's a little personal. Is your partner also a creative, so that he understands your?
No.
Okay, so he probably thought, "Who I married, this crazy lady."
Exactly. That's what he says every day. Yeah, that's pretty accurate to the crazy lady. Yeah, that's it. You got it right. No, I mean, it's he is creative, but in a different field. Like, it's more into IT and computer engineering and stuff. So it's not really
But he understands hard work.
architecture, art, and design.
Yeah.
Yeah, he does. But he's super relaxed as well in his job. He's actually very well disciplined. He knows exactly when to cut it off, and it's just, yeah, that's something that I'm learning every day. But yeah, it's good.
And
That's all good.
okay, you started this learning phase. You started a new job. You did it for like 6 months before you start the job at Zaha Hadid Architects, which I guess was a very nice news for your old employer. They said we hire her for 6 months, and then she leaves. In between this six, in between these 6 months, did you start having? You said you've been starting being contacted from people. Did you start having this personal brand, personal side hustle in between Zaha Hadid and your former job, uh, or Zaha Hadid came first?
That's a funny that's a funny question because you made me remember some conversations I was having with my previous manager. I actually loved working at Princess Foundation. It was super interesting, super chill, but I didn't even apply. I think I applied for ZHA before I joined Princess Foundation. I sent out my portfolio and CV, and I was like, okay, I'm never going to hear from these guys again. Let me send the CV anyway and my portfolio. Like, who knows? And yeah, 5 months went by, and I was working at the Princess Foundation, and I got a call from recruiters. Actually, got an email. I don't remember the thing, but I was super surprised. I was super happy, and I was like, okay, I'm gonna go to the interview and see. I didn't say anything at that time, and I went to the interview the second day. It was super quick. All the process was super fast. I went to the interview, and I mean, I loved the interviewers, and they loved me back, and They hired me for that project that they needed someone with my skills, and I was super happy. And I went into my manager and I was like, I need to have a very sad conversation with you. I didn't even think about it twice. I was like, okay, no, I mean, I have to go there. That's it. I mean, I've always wanted to go there. Like, this is like, I have to do this experience anyway. I cannot. I mean, I sometimes I think about it now. If I stayed at the Princess Foundation, what would have happened to me? I think I would have never got into parametric design. To be honest, I would have been somewhere else, doing some other things. I think I made the right choice, and yeah, it wasn't an uncomfortable conversation. Yeah, it was. He was sad. It was sad that I was leaving, but he was like, "Okay, I understand. It's Hadid, so all the best." Yeah.
Yes, if in life doesn't exist, so you can just imagine it maybe. But what were the skills that was the Hadid seeking for the job? Because from Mariana that was on the show, I understood that Hadid uses so many different softwares and
Yeah.
tools, and that there is no like really one option. So what was the skills that you had that they were seeking?
So the way it works at CHA is that we have different clusters and we have different skill set. Every group, I'm just gonna make it super simple. Like, every group has specific skills and they do a specific task for every project. So we have competitions. Okay, all the people skilled in Maya or design and Maya. Obviously, we're all skilled in design, but that specific tool we needed for the first stage of a project for competitions. So, for example, these guys, okay, you go ahead and do that, and then the other guys who are more responsible into rationalizing things and Grasshopper and Rhino and AutoCAD, you do the other bits, like the more advanced stages. So every stage has specific skill set required. And I think they wanted someone who was a bit more technical, like details, AutoCAD, simply put. They wanted someone who knew very well AutoCAD, because at that moment in time back then, I think it was lacking in the office or something like that. So I came on board. I mean, not only that, like, I had to be also as well, obviously, artistic and creative. At that time, I had a lot of After Effects portfolio I can show them on the side, and they were super happy to see it in the interview. But that wasn't required. But I mean, I was just like, that's me. This is what I do. This is what I've been experimenting. Like, as simply like as it was. And yeah, it's just that they were interested with my background, like the details, like the technical stuff, the project, like different stages. It's just the more mature stages into design that I was working a lot in the past, and that's what got me hired.
Yes.
Yeah, and my personality too.
Oh, I guess I can say that it has been a factor for your application. But do you still have the portfolio you with which you applied, or you lost
Yeah,
it?
I printed it. I have it hard copy. I went in full on classical applicant, like with the full briefcase with all the
Oh,
prints and everything. That was the first time I actually printed my portfolio. I always go to interviews with my laptop or send it before online, and they open it and they see it. But that was the first time I wanted to just tie all the like loose ends in my application. I don't want to have anything I'm gonna regret, even if I don't get it. I did everything to the end. So yeah.
so I do something with all my guests that work at big offices. If you want, and if you still have it in a digital form, you can send me a couple of images or it, and we can do a little Instagram
Yeah.
post. Because I like to, show
Sure.
the Chantal when she was applying, and not now when she is super cool and knows everything and learns softwares in 2 hours.
2 hours.
And okay, you
Yes.
started there, and can you reveal which was your cluster? What was the project? What was your task?
So it was cluster. I mean, it was cluster three. It was more. We call it the Italian cluster because most of the Italian studio back in Rome is the one that moved into London. So after Maxi Museum, there was a big studio in Rome for ZHA, and all the studio moved to London, and I think most of them is in cluster three. So that's why we call them the Italian, the Roman cluster. And yeah, I joined that cluster, and I joined a project in Mexico. I think it was called Bora. So it was a residential tower and offices. And I joined during the, if I'm not mistaken, design development stage, and then into detailed design. So yeah, that's that was the ones I joined in with, which is something I was doing for a long time too. So, and that was I was my role was a senior designer, so I was more working with the consultants, overseeing different things. But yeah, that's that was my role when I joined.
And so basically, you were required to be creative, but your main task wasn't to be the one that generate these crazy shapes at the beginning of the project.
Yeah, that's correct. But because after that project, so the project ends after a few months, and then you move on to another team and another project. So after that, I joined a competition. So this is when I had to show my creativity because there was no project. We were actually building something from scratch. And then after that, I joined another competition, and then another detailed design stage, and then it's just different stages. It requires a lot of flexibility and versatility, and being able to shift your mindset from one specific stage to the other, also to get to know people, because I mean, even though you're at the same company, but you have different teams, different directors, it's so many people, so you really have to be able to be versatile in sense of your own personality to be able to accommodate all these different backgrounds and people. And yeah, communication, that was very very key as well. But yeah.
And could you describe a little more? Because now that we have gone through a little bit your journey and your background, there is this sort of dichotomy or duality of the two aspects of
Mm-hmm.
of yourself. On one side, you create these amazing abstract nature-based shapes, and on the other side, on your daily job, you have to make some crazy shapes into buildable shapes and not only being
Yes.
crazy. And so, how do you approach the two things? Like, for example, you said also,
There.
yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, yeah, no, I'm saying they're actually very interconnected. Even though they're different, there's a lot of element of connection in between them because, I mean, the way I do those abstract crazy shapes like natural elements is the way I think about things. It's not like this is just the end product. And the way I think about things applies the same way in my work career because as well in my work or in different stages of competitions or projects, I tend to use a similar like a scenario in my head where I mean all the directors by now that I'm working mostly they know me very well, they know my personality as well, but I use a lot of the stuff I do now in on the side into the project. So the first time I used Houdini at CHA, they didn't know anything about Houdini. I mean, my director told me, "What the hell are you teaching? Can you actually apply it in that project? Like, just show us." And I was curious, and I was actually okay. No, I'm gonna show you. And yeah, I applied it in one of the interior renders or interior design and concepts. So that's something I was able to replicate from my other side. So instead of being completely separate, I actually managed to merge, even at a small scale. It's a beginning, but it's a step. I think it's important. I like that. I like the fact that now I can merge them. I think before they were completely disconnected. And I was more using the other side, which is after work, like doing all the experiments as a way to, how do you say it in French? It's like défoulement, like a way to
The whole world, the whole part of it. Is it what it means?
decompress.
Decompress.
Like in a way, like from the very intense work and just any work based scenario, it's nice. It's a nice way to, yeah, just an artistic side, just to try to like get it outside of yourself, outside to the world. But now I actually can use that as well at the office, which is very important. So now I don't really need to stay up nights just to try to do things. I can actually do it in the daytime too. Like putting simply, like this is something I can actually merge in the office, which is great. I think as well the people who are around you actually facilitate that. I think I'm lucky enough to have a very open-minded director, which has helped me a lot in terms of being accommodating to this experimental side that I have and trying to merge it in. I mean, mostly in competitions and concept designs. I think when you go into construction, it's very hard to use that, but it's good. It's okay. It's at least it's a good outlet to start from.
And I'm curious, when you work on something that's conceptual work or competition work in the Zaha Hadid, what is the workflow? Do you start with this very so on, like in my, I can make a comparison with something that's happening in a regular office or more traditional office as the one I'm working at. So you receive the brief and then you start working a lot with the rules of the city, with the rules of the project, with concrete, like very realistic data, and putting that into shapes, and then you create the shape very logically, but that's why it's not something organic. It's something based on logic, and it's edgy or pointy or squared or round, depending on the traditional thinking method, so to say. Do you guys at Zaha Hadid start completely, like as you said, with something very conceptual, like we want the building to be, like, for example, I can make the example of one of the first Zaha Hadid building that I experienced, and that was amazing. That was the Maxi Museum in Rome, where I studied, and they opened it while was starting to studying architecture. And the whole idea of the Maxi Museum are this basically sort of light shapes left from the camera, like the exposure light shape, or this flow, and you experience this as a user because you flow through the building, and there is not a really certain way to experience the building. And for me that was amazing, because I was like, okay, this crazy idea in practice works. And I'm asking, is it this the first step to create some crazy idea and then slowly transition it to something that makes actually sense in the real world?
No, I mean, it depends. Every project is different, obviously, and every team member is the people responsible for the concept. It's not just one person, it's like a group effort. But we start off with simple ideas and individual concepts, and then we merge different ideas into one like a final outcome of the concepts. That's how it works, like a sculpture. We have a sculpture which is a fusion of all ideas, but it starts the same way as anything, with the site, with the requirements, with the building regs, with the what the client wants, what his sometimes we get a bit of knowledge of what the client really likes in terms of references from our library as a CHA projects. So we have that as well, and we have a lot of then we build the storyline. There's a lot of poetry involved, for sure, that you can guarantee, and there's a lot of fluidity is everywhere. So all these that's something. I mean, it depends. Sometimes we have very rigid projects depending on the concept, but sometimes we tend to use a lot of curvature in our designs, because we like the flow, we like the movement, we like the dynamic spaces that it creates. It's a bit different from all the contestants in general, and but yeah, it's the same more or less process with a bit more poetry and
And
sculptures.
and do you do what, for example, I've seen on many documentaries like about an office like Björk Ingels Group. What they do is they participate in a lot of competitions because, of course, this is a big part of these offices, and all the ideas that they don't win, they don't go in the trash. They just go in the archive, and they can be reused in another project. Does that happen sometimes at Zaha Hadid, that you have a archive of ideas that you sometimes pull back from, or you always start from scratch?
We always start from scratch, but sometimes if there is an idea that we felt so strongly about, like we got super, super attached to it and we wanted it to win because it was like the perfect idea for that project, we get emotionally attached to it and we want to replicate it in another one, but it will just be an idea and then we will see if it fits. But sometimes ideas don't get picked because they for some unfortunate reasons or budget reasons, but but we have an archive of very strong ideas that if sometimes we see it fits somewhere, then why not, we can go back to it and reassess it and see how we can integrate it again, because there's a lot of emotional attachment to it, but that's it. But usually it's always from scratch.
And to go to the other part, you mentioned that you were working on the executive part, the AutoCAD part. You mentioned our AutoCAD. Do you also moved into some BIM tools at Zaha Hadid, or not yet because the shapes are too uncontrollable in such a software?
I actually learned Revit in like half an hour the other day, and I was joking. No, I'm kidding. I'm kidding. I don't know anything. I mean, I know a bit about Revit. Obviously, we had a bit of training. That's the we introduced BIM into interior design projects, so that was a very successful way of doing it. Even in a competition, we were testing it for the last one I was working on. I had someone obviously from the BIM team, but we had, I mean, it's not just one single workflow. It's actually a combination of CAD, Revit workflow to actually being able to get a nice set of layouts at the end. So that was an interesting workflow. So I learned a lot about Revit from that one. Yeah. So I mean, I combine it with Revit. I combine CAD with Revit. That's my workflow. I don't work on Revit on its own because I don't know.
Maybe. I mean, it won't be so challenging for you. Like after 2-3 hours, you'll be starting preparing workshops on it. So I don't think it's
people won't believe me after.
Yes.
I mean, come on. Look, I mean, I won't believe myself if I even know how to use Revit. I mean, I know how to use it, but I wouldn't know how to build a project on it. I need so many hours. I mean, maybe 4 hours.
But what you said is something that I was also thinking during the conversation, and that's by joining such a team like ZHA, you had now transitioned to a life where actually you have 8 hours of basically exploring these tools for a paid salary every month, and then everything afterwards was just extra, like to further upgrade your skills. But on the side of your job, you have also the whole website, and which looks very professional, and which shows all the work. So what is about your personal brand now beside Zaha Hadid Architects? What are other things you do actually for money on the side?
I actually, just to correct something, I don't use the stuff that I do 8 hours a day. I wish that was the case. I only used it for such a small stage of the project, but it's a good beginning. I think in the future, if we can do more conceptual stages, or I get exposed to more concepts, I'll be able to use it more. But I mean, I'm a bit of a complete round of the project. I worked on different cycles of the project. So, but anyway, to go back to your question, what was the second part of your question?
No, what is your personal brand now that you work at Zaha Hadid? Like, what do you do on the side that earns some money? That's not just passion, but it's profession.
So yeah, since the pandemic started, I got exposed to different courses, and I've been just started giving online classes, and that has been at the same time as experimental for me and giving this knowledge to students. It has been as well a sort of income, which is a plus, I guess, a big plus.
And
And then
do you organize everything yourself, or you join platforms that already offers workshops and you say, hey, I can do a workshop for you guys? You just basically promote it.
it's both. I have my own platform, and I did a couple of workshops on my own, which was great. I think I'm super independent from in that side, and I like to do my own things, my own time, my own rules, and it's good because I can control everything. So I did that, and it was successful. But at the same time, I also like teamwork, and I wanted to join these platforms too, and I was lucky enough to be involved with them, and that was a successful experience too. So I worked with the Live Academy, Middle East Live Academy, and I worked with Design Morphine, the Bartlett B Pro program. I joined them last year and this year as well for classes, for a series of classes. So that was really good, and that was good for me too, and for my like portfolio. Like I never thought I'll be teaching at the Bartlett or whatsoever. That's something that's okay. It was as well alien for me, but yeah, it just happens, and you grow and you build a portfolio and a platform, and then why not? You get exposed and you take that chance, and that's what happened. And now I have a couple of workshops planned. I did one with Mariana. That was completely independent, me and her. We just did a workshop together. It was super cool. It was super fun. And yeah, now I have another one upcoming with Design Morphine. It hasn't been marketed yet. I think next week we'll start talking about it. But yeah, that's upcoming in September. And I think I'm taking a break after that. Just a short break. I think I need to replenish my knowledge and refresh my generative agenda. But yeah, it's good to have these workshops, and they're all connected. There's nothing, in a sense, super alien or super new from for anything in terms of subject. It's always the same things in terms of interest for me, like nature, elements of nature, biomimicry in a sense. So yeah, it will be like from a similar theme, but a new workflow, obviously. So yeah.
And in which language do you do your workshop? English, because you said also Middle East, maybe some, do you speak Arabic, or what is, what is the language that you do the workshops in?
No, the workshops in general are all English, but I speak Arabic. It's my first language because I'm Lebanese. I also speak French as a second language. I haven't done a workshop in French. I'm curious how that would come out because yeah, I don't know. Curious. And yeah, that's it. And English, obviously. A little bit of Italian, just tiny bit.
Well, because you're in the Italian cluster, so it's impossible not to learn some Italian, I guess.
That's true. That's true.
And from all of this, I'm curious, like, how do you feel that in such a short span of time, which, I mean, for you probably doesn't feel so short, from 2017 to today, your career has spinned from this regular traditional situation, from this 9-to-5 job, to this crazy moment where you working at one of the cutting edge offices and doing workshops, and you need to have a break because you are overworked. Like, is it crazy for you? Do you ever stop and stare and think, okay, this has escalated very quickly? And
I do. Every day. I need a moment to be like, okay, what is going on? What have I done? How did it start? But yeah, I'm happy because I'm super happy with everything that I'm doing. I finally get to expose my artistic side and try to nourish it as much as I go. And it's just architecture has so many extensions. You don't need to be just I mean, for me, I don't like comfort zone. I always like to get out of it. So I'm pretty comfortable in my non-comfort zone. In a sense.
And how did you feel when recently you have posted on Instagram? There was a Forbes mini audio article about Are you including you in a list of female inspiring creatives? Did you feel crazy? Like, did you feel like, okay, I don't know, do you have sort of a imposter syndrome that you think I'm not so special and
Yes,
they're
all the time.
putting me in
Yes,
there?
all the time. All the time. And even when I read it, I was like, okay, this is a joke. This is a spam. This is not true. Like, what is going on? Why am I there? Like, but then I mean, I'm super humble. Like, I like to think so. I hope I come out humble because it's the truth. I'm super like, I get overwhelmed when I see all this attention, but even it's still virtual in a sense, but at the same time, it is real. It's happening.
Yeah, I mean, like crazy, right? Like Forbes, and then the next week the Creative Insider podcast. Like,
oh my God, that's I peaked. I cannot go any further than this.
Yeah, this is the top of your career.
I've reached my top, yes.
Media game. But did they also contacted you in advance before putting you out there, or you just find this article?
No, I think, but that was from last year, and I forgotten totally about it because I didn't take it so seriously. But then I fell on it the other day again. I'm like, why have I not shared this? Like, this is great. Like, I completely erased it from my memory, and then I mean, I was like, okay, and I didn't even think people would actually react to it, and that was great that people appreciated it. That's my imposter syndrome again kicking in. I still don't. Yeah, sometimes I don't believe what I'm seeing or what I'm writing or whatever. But it's happening. It's there.
Well,
it's written.
Don't forget to mention us.
Best podcast ever.
Yeah, of course. Well, I think we have covered a lot of your journey and a lot of the topics, and I don't want to be taking you away from your time, because our podcast takes quite a while. It's 1.5 hours. It's almost a full new software learned. So we conclude always. We try to build sort of a toolkit of inspiration for our listeners, and I like to end all the conversations to our guests with asking them what is something that inspires you when you're like, I mean, you're pretty creative, and I guess that not often you feel uninspired, but is there a favorite book, a favorite movie, a favorite place, favorite activity that you like to do to get further more inspired in your daily life?
That's a nice question. I actually get inspired from different places, from films, from movies, from science a lot. Recently, physics. I'm very nerdy. That doesn't sound like super inspiring, but physics, there's so much beauty and essence in it. So I've been watching a lot of documentaries recently, like Brian Cox or any other person. They're super cool. But I mean, like nature, from jogging, sometimes I see something, from books, a sentence, from feelings, like from a message. Sometimes I want to send across. I tend to use my art to send it. It's true. I do it. Like sometimes it's just different inputs, really.
And is there something
specify one thing
specific that pops out now in the moment, like a movie or a book, or I don't know, a documentary, or what you have recently watched, something that you can shout out on the moment?
It might sound cheesy, but the first thing I thought about was Interstellar. That's something I see every year. It's one of my favorite movies. I love it so much. But like the whole storyline, the landscapes, the beauty of the compositions, the cinematography, because I mean, I'm influenced by films. My brother, the film editor, I said it again, but I know a bit about like technical bits. So I'm quite intrigued about like scenes and how they build everything up, how everything takes so much time and you only see such a small fraction of it edited. I mean, it's just the amount of work. I appreciate it because I know a little bit more about technicalities, but besides that, it's just the story itself. I find it quite interesting, like times and loops and all that. So I did the workshop recently about like attractors. I saw a documentary about Lawrence attractors. I had no idea who that person was or what did he do, but it's just so interesting to be able to learn something from such incredible minds from the past that they actually did something, and people now from their formulas they can replicate it and do all these iterative forms that you can use it and get inspired from it. I think that's part of the things. I think I just fall on different documentaries and I grab something that attracts me the most. But it all stems from the same thing, like life, like morphogenesis and all these amazing structures that we sometimes take for granted. We see them, but we don't really see them at the same time. So, yeah.
Yeah. So thank you. It was an amazing conversation, very inspiring. And last but not least, where can people find you online? You can shout out your online presence.
Sure. I think I'm super active on Instagram. So that's my strongest online presence. I use it a lot for different things, post my workshops, my work, my expressions, my photography, like my trips. So please feel free to follow along. And the other bits is my website. Obviously, it's always updated to different things that I'm doing. You can always find the same information there. Facebook, I'm not super active there. So I think LinkedIn is my professional platform. So you'll find all my latest career developments happening over there. And all the artwork and all the craziness, you find it on Instagram.
Perfect.
My website.
I will be putting all the links in the description of the podcast. And don't forget to follow TCI Podcast too. So thank you very much and have a good evening.
Thank you, Georgi. Bye.
Bye-bye.
The whole world stops just like that.
Hey friends, thank you very much for listening to this podcast. You've been amazing. Before we go, I just want to remind you that if you want to support us, you can just go on the creativeinsider.com where you can subscribe to our monthly newsletter, or you can follow us on our social media channels, which are Instagram at TCI Podcast or the LinkedIn page, The Creative Insider. By doing this, you will have a bigger social media presence, which always looks attractive to more and more important guests. And so this is very fundamental. And if you really love what we do and you want to help us doing a better production, just click on the Patreon link below where you can support us with the wished amount of money you think it's okay for you. It's a monthly subscription, but you can cancel anytime. So thank you very much and have a good week, guys. Bye bye.